Good news, bad news for the LA Kings. We'll give you the details on that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. The LA Kings were back in action in Game 60 of the NHL season Wednesday night, back home after a disappointing road trip where the Kings went 0-3. Kings were riding a 4-game losing skid, and back home, though, where they have been the top team of the NHL with a record of 19-3-3 at home coming into this game. They were facing the St. Louis Blues for the second time in 3 games, with a third meeting in LA coming up on Saturday as well. Checking the Kings lineup in this one, the Kings would go back to the more traditional 12-6 setup, 12 forwards and 6 defensemen. As for the forwards, pretty familiar as far as the top 3, and listed as the top line, the Anze Kopitar line with Alex Turcotte and Adrian Kempe. Philip Deneau listed as the second line with Warren Foegele and Trevor Moore. Quentin Byfield listed as the third line with Kevin Fiala and Alex Laferriere. We'll talk about the listed as the line coming up in a bit, but the fourth line was different. Samuel Hellenius was just called up from the Ontario Reign, and he was inserted into the lineup as the fourth line center, and he would have Tanner Jeannot and Trevor Lewis on the wings. Akil Thomas would be the one healthy scratch as far as the forwards go, and the defensive pairings would be a little bit different as well. You'd have Mikey Anderson and Vladislav Gavrikov, the top pairing, Joel Edmondson and Drew Doughty, the second pairing with Jacob Moverar and Brant Clark back in the lineup on the third pairing. So again, just the 6 defensemen for this game, Jordan Spence and Kyle Burroughs, were both a healthy scratch. Darcy Kemper would get the start in net. David Riddick would be the backup. So for the big question for me going into this game with the Kings on a losing skid, with the Kings coming off an 0-3 road trip, big question for me was, would the Kings return to their identity? Would they be a solid, tough team to play against defensively, which they weren't recently on that road trip? And would they keep the home ice dominance going? Well, as far as the game summary in this one, the Kings did not play a bad first period, but they would fall behind, which we've seen them do a lot recently. We've also seen them score right after being scored upon, and they did that in this game as well. Quentin Byfield with a goal to tie things up at 1 apiece, and that's where we would be after 1 period. Second period, LA would take the lead on a Trevor Moore goal that made it 2-1, but the Blues would respond with under a minute left in the period, a power play goal, and we'd be tied at 2-2. No scoring in the third period, no scoring in the overtime period, but oh boy, did the Kings have their chances. It ends up going to a shootout where the Kings have not been good this year, and that continued. St. Louis scores twice, the Kings once. Final score, Blues 3, and the Kings 2 in a shootout. LA does get a point, but they dropped to 31-20-9 overall on the season for 71 points. We'll tell you where the Kings are in the standings now after this latest shootout loss. But the Kings losing skid has now reached 5 in a row. LA now 14-3-4 on home ice. The Kings are 3-9 now this season in games that go beyond regulation, 1-3 in games that are decided in the shootout. The overtime this season, it's a little bit weird because the Kings actually, when you watch them play in overtime periods, they're not that bad. They have a lot of puck position. They get chances, but finishing has been an issue, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. As for the game stats in this one, the Kings lose 3-2 in a shootout. Shots on goal favored St. Louis 30-23, and if it were not for the overtime period, the Kings would have been badly outshot in this game. Special teams continue to be an issue for the Kings. We've said this a lot this year. Power play for St. Louis 1 for 4, while LA went 0 for 2. Faceoffs 1 favored the Blues narrowly, 27-25. Hits narrowly favored the Kings, 22-20, and block shots narrowly favored St. Louis, 19-17. So as the stats would indicate, this was a pretty competitive, close game. and the margin of victory and defeat was pretty slim. As for what was good for the LA Kings from a team standpoint, well, I thought for the most part, the Kings looked more like themselves. I've mentioned it recently in some of these games on this recent road trip that I was a little concerned because the Kings weren't playing Kings hockey. Too many defensive lapses. They weren't a hard team to play against. I thought for the most part in this game against the Blues, the Kings did what they usually do. They didn't give up a lot of high quality chances. And I do think that this performance was actually in some ways encouraging. It was more like Kings hockey, which is, again, tough to play against, good defensively, low scoring probably, and give them a chance to win in the end. And I thought that that was the case. What was not so good for the Kings from a team standpoint was not finishing. The Kings had enough quality scoring chances in this game to get 2 points. They had 2 clean breakaways in overtime. 2. Philip Deneau had one. Trevor Moore had the other. For Deneau, I never saw a clear replay of it, but real time and the one replay that they showed, I thought he missed the net. Maybe Jordan Binnington, the St. Louis goalie, got a piece of it, but that was a tough one. And then Trevor Moore had another clean breakaway in overtime. At least he made Jordan Binnington make a save on him. And I don't have the numbers on this, but it sure seems like the Kings are one of the worst teams in the NHL on breakaways and odd man rush opportunities. They don't make other teams pay for their mistakes as often as teams make the Kings pay for their mistakes. There was also a quality odd man rush opportunity in the second period, particularly a 2-on-1 where Kevin Fiala held the puck. Now, eventually he found Quentin Byfield in a pretty good scoring position, but Byfield passed the puck right back to Fiala. He wasn't really in a good shooting lane and didn't have a chance to get off a shot. So they got no shots on a great opportunity. And there were just way too many missed opportunities. And look, we know the Kings are not a high-scoring team. And they cannot afford, when they do get good scoring opportunities, to either not convert or not even get shots on goal. That can't happen. And I think in this game, it certainly cost them the opportunity to get 2 points. And the power play, again, nowhere near even okay. They had 2 chances, and I think they had maybe 2 shots on goal. And no quality shots. As far as the coach's quote in this one from head coach Jim Hiller, he was asked afterwards about the Kings not finishing on some great chances. And this is what Jim Hiller had to say, quote, "They all develop a little differently. There's so much timing and space and what you have to do and lots of different things involved. In the end, the player has to make the best choice and execute. It's not a coaching thing. Kevin will probably look at that. Q will look at that. They might talk after that, but they're in the moment. They see what they see, and it just comes down to executing." End quote. I don't actually completely agree with that when he says it's not a coaching thing. And I get that when the players are on the ice and in the moment, they do have to kind of let their instincts take over. But I think as a coach, you can stress to them, guys, when we get these opportunities, we're a shoot first team. We have to have a shoot first mentality. You've got to do what you've got to do, but I am encouraging you as your head coach to shoot the puck, to have a shooter's mentality and even a shoot first mentality. So I don't necessarily completely agree with that. It can't necessarily be a coaching thing. As for the big takeaway for me from this game, I would say I'm a little encouraged. Certainly not the result we wanted, but I thought the Kings played better defensively. And I think if they just convert on a few of their numerous opportunities, I think they win. And I think we probably feel a little bit better about things. But the lack of shots on goal is a concern for me. The Kings were outshot on home ice in every period of this game, except for the overtime. They had only 19 shots through the first 3 periods. And look, St. Louis is a pretty good team, and they're looking more and more like they could be a playoff team. They're playing the way I think we want the Kings to play down the stretch. They're getting better as the season is going along, while the Kings are not at the moment. But the Kings need to get more shots on goal. And the very basic pucks on net, players to the net, get traffic in front, get rebounds, get deflections. That's what the Kings need to do more of. And I wasn't completely dissatisfied with the offensive opportunities the Kings had in this one, but again, there does need to be more, and there does need to be more of a shot mentality, and they do have to finish. Again, they had good chances. You've got to finish on some of those good chances, and they didn't do that nearly enough in the game against the Blues. Up next, we'll talk about some of the individual performances. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. I do want to tell you about FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook right now. NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than America's number one sportsbook. That is FanDuel, where you can place live bets throughout a game. Even if you miss the opening tip and you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets and do a same game parlay. FanDuel's live betting feature helps you keep engaged in every moment of the exciting action, whether it's backing your team for a late fourth quarter rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three-pointer. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, FanDuel customers, new FanDuel customers, can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's check in on some of the individuals in this shootout loss to the St. Louis Blues. And we're going to go back to starting with the man in net, and that would be Darcy Kuemper. I thought he was really good in this game. I thought Darcy made a lot of quality saves, especially in the third period. There were times in the first period and in the third period where the Blues were controlling the play. They had a lot of time in the King zone, and while they didn't get a lot of high danger area chances, they did get a lot of pucks on the net. And again, Darcy Kuemper had to be active. First goal he allowed, LA defenseman Joel Edmondson had the puck bounce over his stick as he was playing it on the boards. He needs to have his body up against the boards. So if the puck bounces over his stick, it can hit his foot or his shin and not get by him. It led to a 2-on-1. The Blues would score on it. So there's a odd man rush where the opponent took advantage of it and scored. But a very nice shot, I thought, on a backhand in tight against Darcy Kuemper. Now, Drew Doughty did a pretty nice job of taking the pass away on that 2-on-1. So you could argue that Kuemper maybe should have recognized that his teammate was in a good position to take that shot away, and so he needs to be more square to the shooter. But I kind of, on that one, for me, I give credit to the shooter on making a nice shot. Second goal was off a power play. Robert Thomas getting in a good scoring area in the high slot and putting it in. Mikey Anderson tried one of those diving defensive plays to take away the pass with his body and his stick. The pass was just flipped over his stick, and Thomas was in a good scoring area, and he converted on it. But I thought Darcy Kuemper had a lot of quality saves, and I thought overall he played well enough for the Kings to win. 28 saves in this one. Now, he was not great in the shootout, has not been great in shootouts this year, but 3 periods and overtime, I thought he was good enough in this one. But on the season, with the loss, the shootout loss, Darcy Kuemper's now 18-8-7 on the season and falling to 10-1-2 on home ice this year. Quinton Byfield scored the Kings' first goal for his 12th of the season. Just a great, aggressive, direct shot when he had an opportunity. And that's what the Kings need more of. You get a good opportunity, you put it on net, there was some traffic in front, and he was able to score. And that's also why it makes it so strange that later in the game, when Byfield had a great scoring chance in the high slot, he passed the puck. He needs to be more selfish and more aggressive in those situations and put the puck on net like he did on his first goal. And frankly, all the Kings players need to have more of that mentality, in my opinion. Byfield did finish a +1. He had 4 shots on goal. He had 5 hits, which was a nice aggressive game for him. And you talk about, I mentioned this earlier when we give the starting lineup, and the Kings release a lineup of the roster, and it has the lines listed, kind of 1, 2, 3. But you talk about who is the Kings' number one center. Forget about what the lineup sheet says. What's the time on ice? Quinton Byfield was the top center in terms of ice time. He played 20 minutes and 51 seconds. Andrei Kopitar played 19 minutes and 36 seconds. That included over 3 minutes of power play time, which Quentin Byfield did not have because he plays on the second power play unit. Philip Deneau played 18 minutes and 36 seconds. So those are really your top three centers. It's Byfield, Kopitar, and Deneau. It's close as far as the ice time, but I think that's really the realistic rankings of as far as who the top centers are on the top lines, that kind of thing. Trevor Moore scored the other goal for the Kings, his 12th of the season. He's got 6 in the last 11 games. Talked on the recent road trip where it seemed like the Kings were not getting a lot of breaks. And I said, you make your own luck as a team. And I thought Trevor Moore on his goal that he scored made his own luck on this one. It wasn't pretty. It was ugly. It was a dirty goal. It was a greasy goal, hardworking goal, whatever you want to call it. He deflected the puck from the side of the net towards the front of the net. It goes off of the skate of goalie Jordan Bennington and into the net. It found a way in. And again, that was a player making his own luck. When you put the puck in a dangerous area, sometimes you get good things happening. And again, I think the Kings need to do more of that. But good for Trevor Moore on getting that goal. That said, he also had some pretty other important opportunities in the game. The breakaway in overtime didn't convert, and he also failed on his shootout attempt as well. Kevin Fiala. A lot of people will point to the penalty that Kevin took very late in the second period that the Blues scored on, and we'll talk about, that was bad, Kevin. I know that afterwards Jim Hiller said he thought it was a bad penalty. I honestly thought it was a bad call. I know Kevin apparently has this reputation. I don't really fully understand it, if that played a factor in it, or if it was just a bad call by the referee. But I thought Kevin got a raw deal on that call. I really thought it was very, very marginal. And I thought there were some calls in this game that were certainly iffy. There was one on Adrian Kempe earlier that was just ticky-tack stuff. But you could argue that, when you recognize that the referees are calling it really close, that you have to adjust your game accordingly. I'm not blaming the refs for the Kings losing, but I did think there were some calls that I didn't agree with. As for Kevin Fiala, no shots on goal in this game for Kevin Fiala. That can't happen. Period. He did have an assist on the Byfield goal for his 40th point in the season, and he had a couple other real nice setup passes in this one. Could have had at least 2 more assists in this one as well. But he has to be one of the Kings' finishers. He and Adrian Kempe are the 2 best scorers on the team. And he can't score if he doesn't have any shots on goal, which is wonderful analysis on my part. But it wasn't that he didn't play well, but I mean, if I'm Jim Hiller, I go to Kevin Fiala and I show him the score sheet and I point to that 0 and I'm like, hey man, that can't happen. You got to shoot. And Adrian Kempe, now he did have some shots on goal, but they all came late. And I think he's the Kings' best offensive threat. And he was really quiet until the third period. Now he did have a couple of decent shots on the 2 power plays the Kings had. And again, he had finished with 3 shots on goal. So, he kind of came alive a bit in the third period, but he and Fiala, I think they need to combine for a minimum of 8 shots on goal per game. Those guys have to shoot. They're our best finishers. They're our best scorers. They've got to get shots on goal. Now, it's not completely on them. Their teammates have to help set them up and get the puck to them when they're in good scoring areas, but they have to have way more of a shot mentality. Adrian Kempe and Kevin Fiala combining for 3 shots on goal is a formula for the Kings to not win, in my opinion. So shoot it more, guys. Also, Adrian Kempe did have a opportunity in the shootout, and he did not convert in that one. Obviously, he had no points in this one. Warren Foegele continues to get great chances. He's always so active. He had an assist in this one for his 33rd point of the year. He drew a penalty because of his energy and his hustle. 3 shots on goal, 3 hits as well, flying around the ice. Warren Foegele continues to get some good opportunities, but again, he did have 2 great scoring chances. I think they were both in the second period, and Jordan Bennington made the save on both of them. So another instance of quality scoring opportunities, but not finishing. Brant Clark. Let's talk about Brant Clark. He was back in the lineup in this one, I know, to the delight of many of you out there. And I wanted to get another quote from Jim Hiller. He was asked what he thought about Brant Clark. And here's what Jim Hiller said. He said, quote, "I thought he was good. I thought he had good intensity. Again, that's a tough opponent there. And yeah, I thought he was really good. It was a really good step for him," end quote. Okay. I thought that Brant Clark played okay. He played 12 minutes. I thought he was fine. I didn't think he was really noticeable on either end of the ice. Now, that's a good thing in your own end when you're playing defense because it means you're not turning the puck over, you're not making mistakes. So that's good. Especially though for an offensive defenseman, it's not that great when you're not noticeable on the offensive end of the ice. He didn't have any points. He didn't have any shots on goal. He was the quarterback on the second power play unit, but they hardly had any ice time at all because the Kings had 2 power plays and the number 1 unit was out there for most of the time. So 12 shifts for Brant Clark. His stat line was a lot of zeros except for 1 block shot. Obviously, it's better for his development if he plays as opposed to him not playing. But it seemed like you get a lot of quotes on social media for what that's worth. And it was like, Brant Clark is not playing. We're not playing well. We're not winning. Brant Clark needs to be on the ice. Well, he was on the ice and the Kings lost in a shootout. So, and look, I'm not blaming this on Brant Clark. He's essentially a rookie. And yes, I thought he'd be doing a little bit better at this point, if I'm being honest about it. And I'm still optimistic about what Brant Clark can be. But I just think I've said it a bunch. I think the worrying about his ice time right now is not nearly the issue that a lot of people are seeming to make it out to be. I did want to mention Sammy Holenius. I liked how he looked in this game. Limited ice time being a 4th-line center, 6 minutes and 46 seconds. There was one play of note in the second period. He made a nice defensive play, created a turnover. It led to a 3-on-2, and he had the puck on his stick, and he didn't shoot. He passed it. He made an extra pass. He's a young guy. He wants to fit in. I think he wants to be unselfish. But like I've said, in that instance, he should have been selfish. He should have shot the puck. And I think we need more selfishness on this Kings team, which sounds kind of weird to say. But I think they need to shoot more. I think they need to forget about setting up their teammates for the most part and shoot first and pass second. But I thought Sammy Holenius played pretty well in his limited ice time, and I think he deserved another start in the next game against St. Louis. We shall see. All right, coming up, where are the Kings now in the standings, and what's the latest that's coming up for the trade deadline? That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. All right, let's check the updated Pacific Division standings. The Golden Knights were winners over Toronto last night, 5-2. So they're 37, 18, and 6. They've hit the 80-point mark in first place in the Pacific Division. So they now have a 6-point lead on Edmonton. The Oilers, 35, 22, and 4 for 74 points. Edmonton has lost 6 of 7. They will be in action on Thursday as they host Montreal. So the Kings do pick up a point and they do gain ground on the Oilers. LA is now 3 points back of Edmonton for second place and a potential home ice advantage in a first round series matchup. Kings are 31, 20, and 9, as I mentioned earlier, for 71 points. And they still have 1 game in hand on the Oilers as well. The Kings also have a 4-point lead on both Calgary and Vancouver. The Flames and Canucks are tied with 67 points for 4th place. Vancouver was a 3-2 winner over the Ducks last night, and Calgary will play in Dallas coming up on Thursday night. So even in a disappointing finish for the Kings, they did gain some ground on Edmonton and had a point. So they still have a decent lead, 4-point lead on both the 2 teams that are chasing them for 3rd place. All right, the trade deadline comes up Friday, noon LA time. One of the players that we've talked about being a possible target for the Kings was traded on Wednesday. That would be right shot forward Oliver Bjorkstrand. He was sent by the Seattle Kraken to the Tampa Bay Lightning, along with forward Yanni Gourde, a defenseman, and a 5th-round pick in exchange for 2 first-round picks and a 2nd-round pick, and forward Mikey Isamont. So again, Oliver Bjorkstrand off the board not an option now for the Kings going forward, as he is now a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Some guys that we've talked about a lot recently: Jonathan Marchessault, Ricard Raquel, Alex Tuch, Brock Besser, Kyle Palmieri, all still available potentially for the LA Kings to get a right shot top 6 type forward to help them out offensively and on the power play. The Mikko Rantanen rumors with the Kings are still out there. NHL insider Elliot Friedman reported on Wednesday that he said the Kings, Maple Leafs, and Stars were the 3 teams that he specifically named that are interested in Mikko Rantanen. He didn't say those are the only teams, but those are the 3 teams that he specifically named. I still don't think this is going to happen. I still think Carolina will hold on to Mikko Rantanen and take their chances in the playoffs, even at the risk of having him walk for nothing at the end of the season. If the Kings are interested in Rantanen, there are so many questions on how they would make it work. Plus, what do the people running the Kings really think about what this team is as far as their chances this year? For example, Rantanen's current team, the Hurricanes, they feel like they're a decent cup contender. And I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. They're not going to pick them necessarily to be one of the favorites, but they have a decent opportunity. But unlike the Kings, they've advanced in the playoffs several times over the last few years, even made it to a conference finals. So they haven't gotten to the Stanley Cup final, and they felt like they needed a number 1 alpha forward to try and get him there. And that's why they took a chance and went and traded for Mikko Rantanen. But the Kings aren't that team, and they're not in that position, I don't believe. So what are they looking to do if they were to get a Mikko Rantanen? He's been a great player, at least while he was in Colorado. He hasn't been great in Carolina, and it makes you wonder about his fit in a certain system like the Kings. And even if they get him, are the Kings now a cup contender? I would say no. Does he help? Probably, depending on what the Kings have to give up. But, is he the type of guy that can thrive in the Kings system? Can he be an offensive star in the Kings system? I think that's a question mark. And also, the Kings would need to be able to re-sign him to make that deal worth their while. We're talking about $13 million for 7 or 8 years. So can the Kings pull that off? And if they say they land him and then they end up losing in the first round anyway, do they kind of blow it up and try and build their team completely around him? So a lot of questions. We'll see if we have any answers coming up Friday, noon Pacific time at the NHL trade deadline. All right, for you everydayers, those of you listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Friday, a full show devoted to you and your thoughts on what's going on with the LA Kings, and a full recap of what the Kings do or do not do ahead of Friday's trade deadline. Should be a fun show. If you want to get an email in for the Friday Fan Feedback Show, it's lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can always post your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. We'd love for you to stay connected with the show by following us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings go.